Welcome to the 43rd Annual Hawaii International Film Festival presented by Holly Kalani and today's panel discussion with our New American Perspectives cohort this year. Panel is entitled Drawing a Life, New Perspectives in Film and Art. This year we are featuring 7 people in our cohort, 2 of which are visual artists and are featured in the films that we're screening at the festival. My name is Anna Page. I'm the Director of Programming at the festival, and I'm really honored and thrilled to welcome this group of panelists that we have today. Before I get started, this panel and this program is presented in partnership with the Vilcek Foundation, and Liz Boylan from the foundation is just going to come and say a few words about the foundation and about this year's program.
Thank you so much, Anna, and aloha, everyone. I'm Liz Boylan, Communications Manager with the Vilcek Foundation. We're a philanthropic organization based in New York, and we were founded in 2000 with the mission to recognize, celebrate, and uplift immigrant contributions to the arts, sciences, culture, and society in the United States. One of the ways that we accomplish this mission is through partnering with organizations like HIFF. We first began working with HIFF in 2007 to present the New American Perspectives program to uplift and create a platform for immigrant filmmakers and artists and celebrate their contributions to cinema, art, and society. As Anna said, this year we're delighted to have a cohort of 7 artists: Sing-Jae Lee, Geoff McFetridge, Sara Nodjoumi, Nicky Nodjoumi, Schauder, Chiaki Yanagimoto, and Denise Zmekhol. And we have 5 amazing films, 3 of which are screening this afternoon, so we do encourage you to come to those. With all of this year's programming, we're so delighted to uplift all of these artists' voices and work, and we hope that you enjoy the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So for this panel today, I have questions that we have pre-written here, but I also want to keep this conversational, so feel free to ask questions of each other as well, and talk freely, give feedback. We'll be sharing microphones, and then at the end we will have time for audience members to ask questions of our panelists. Before we get started, I'm going to do this sort of embarrassing thing where I talk about each of our panelists and introduce them. But I do want to give some little background about the artists and filmmakers that we have featured today. First up, and our featured filmmaker who we had a masterclass with last night, featured artist rather, Geoff McFetridge. A round of applause for Geoff McFetridge. Most of you are probably familiar, but Geoff is an artist and designer, and he found drawing as an outlet early in life, using the steadiness of the pencil and the simplicity of line to tame his mind and make sense of the world around him. After attending Cal Arts, he expanded into printmaking and graphic design, working with indie magazines and filmmakers Spike Jonze and Sofia Coppola, while finding and establishing his voice as an artist. His work is now ubiquitous, with his bold graphic style embraced by companies from Apple to Warby Parker. The film that he is featured in this year, Geoff McFetridge Drawing a Life, is directed by Dan Covert and executive produced by Spike Jonze. And Dan is an alum of HIFF. We've shown his short films before as well. So a big welcome to Geoff today. Next up, and this is in no particular order, we have Sing-Jae Lee with us today. Sing is an award-winning writer-director. His short films have garnered numerous awards, including BBC's Best of the North, and his work in the music video and commercial space has been recognized by Cannes Lion, Clios, MTV VMAs, and the Brit Awards. Lee was selected as Variety's Top 10 Storytellers to Watch in 2019, and he received at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival the Director Award for his feature debut, which we are featuring tonight at 8:30 p.m., The Accidental Getaway Driver. So big welcome to Sing as well. Next up, we have the team behind A Revolution on Canvas, also playing today at 5:45, so please come to that. We have co-directors Till Schauder and Sara Nodjoumi. Till is originally from Germany and is a Brooklyn-based writer, director, and cinematographer. His first documentary, The Iran Job, which some of you have probably seen, was released on Netflix, mentioned as an Oscar contender, and shortlisted for a German Academy Award. His 2017 documentary, When God Sleeps, premiered at Tribeca and won numerous awards. His feature documentary, Warriors of Faith, won the German Television Academy Award, and Revolution on Canvas is the first film that he co-directed, and with his producing partner and wife, Sara Nodjoumi. So welcome, Till. Sara Nodjoumi is a producer, director, and film festival programmer. Oh, after my own heart. Producing credits include The Iran Job, shortlisted for German Academy Award and released on Netflix. When God Sleeps, which played over 100 festivals worldwide, premiered on Independent Lens, and won numerous international awards before being shortlisted for a German Academy Award, as well as Reggae Boys and Revolution on Canvas is her directorial debut. So welcome, Sara. Next up, we have Nicky Nodjoumi. We're very honored to welcome Nicky to the festival this year. Nickzad Nodjoumi, more commonly known as Nicky, is an Iranian-born American fine art painter. He currently lives and works in Brooklyn. His painting addresses Iranian politics, history, power, and corruption. Nodjoumi was born in Iran in 1942. During the Iranian Revolution, he was exiled from Iran, and in 1980 moved back to New York City. Nodjoumi's artwork has exhibited at various galleries and museums and collections worldwide, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the British Museum in London, the DePaul Art Museum in Chicago, and the National Museum of Cuba. A really big warm welcome to Nicky Nodjoumi. We have Chiaki Yanagimoto, is a Japanese-born, Los Angeles-based producer, director, and entrepreneur. Her producing work include documentaries that we've shown at HIFF, such as Kampai for the Love of Sake. She is also the founder of Saka, a distribution hub for Japanese independent films. As a unique multicultural creative force, she began her career working for Takaichise, the 2023 Sundance Film Festival competition documentary The Cold at the End of the World is her directorial debut, and we've had a couple of wonderful screenings of that film so far. So big welcome to Chiaki. And last but not least, we have Denise Zmekhol. Denise is a Syrian-Brazilian director, and her films have been awarded for their visual style and depth storytelling. Her film Children of the Amazon, supported by ITVS, aired on PBS. She co-produced the Emmy-winning PBS series Digital Journey, and she presented the story of her current film Skin of Glass at Pop-Up Magazine and a TED Women Conference. So a big welcome to Denise as well. And that's a mouthful because there's a lot of amazing panelists today, and I definitely want to make sure that I, recognize everybody before we get started in our conversation. I wanted to open the conversation, and this feel free, anybody can pick up and answer this question. It's just to start off today. One thing that is a through line through all of the films that we're presenting as part of the festival this year is that all of your work, both art featured in the films and the films themselves, explore true stories and lived experiences, your own or other people's. What is important to you when creating work that both documents and shares a unique perspective? So I can pick that up anywhere.
What is important in sharing a true story?
Yeah, and a unique perspective.
Does someone else want to go first? I think the truth is that you want to tell the truth. You want to try to stay nuanced, but you also want to make a good film, entertaining. So sometimes you have to embellish the truth, and I think that's true for all documentarians, even though everyone says, documentary is 100% true. It is, but there are moments where, for example, in the story about my father, there's so much we couldn't include. You also have to pick and choose what is about, what you're going to include in a film. So those are my first. It wasn't fair that I went first to answer that question.
I can pick it up from there. I think what Sara said, a nuanced perspective is very, very important. My film was, it's about this true incident, terrifying incident that happened in 1995 in Tokyo. And as you said, there's so many stories that we just couldn't, fit in one film. And you end up picking and choosing. But for us, it was important to keep the nuanced perspective. We didn't want to give out conclusion, give out a certain perspective on farther side of either spectrum before audience has a chance to sort of digest and think for themselves. So we kind of deliberately didn't choose a side, although we are, as filmmakers, are choosing the side, that we kind of wanted to give audience the chance to sort of like think about what happened, like think about what they just saw and come to their own conclusion. But as a filmmaker, of course, we have perspective, but I think nuanced perspective is a really key to documentary, especially documentary filmmaking.
I want to say something inspired in what you said. It's like sometimes it's like your own truth about something, by the way of choosing what you tell and how you tell the story. And in my case with Skin of Glass, which is also a personal story that goes, kind of organically to our global and social issues. Sometimes I think, anyone could have made that film, but, being part of the story, because, it was a story about my father's modernist building from the 60s that is also a character in the film. I had to choose to tell the story from my point of view, and I think nobody else could do it, right? So it's also how you would choose to tell the story and the truth.
Yeah, and I think I'm unique because my perspective is the sorry about the sonic youth, is like I'm like the subject of a film, and the movie had already been like half made until I realized, like I just said yes because I'm sort of interested in being uncomfortable. So like, oh, this is going to be uncomfortable, so I'll do it. Like thinking like, oh, this is like an endurance test and a willingness to share. And I didn't really think about the repercussions. So as filmmakers, I'm sort of curious how many like subjects have refused you, because I realized like the reason, like most artists don't have films made about them, like probably 99% of them. And I sort of realized why, because once you sort of commit to something, there's this document that freezes you in time. And like anybody from my past could step forward and be like, that's not true. Or now meets me today and be like, oh, in the movie you said this, like how come you're not like saying that now? Or it really is sort of, and I'm actually comfortable with it, but luckily I am, because I didn't like predict the sort of consequences of being the subject of something like that. Like, and Dan, the filmmaker, was in total control of how, it's his film, it's how he views me, it's his sort of thesis on who I am.
Yeah, Dan is creating this film about you from his perspective, but it is your life, and so this is when we talk about getting to the truth. What is the unique, truthful perspective? This is sort of my follow-up question to both you and to Nicky. What is the feel like? I mean, you just spoke a little bit about that, but what does it really feel like to have you're basically as an artist participating in another person's work of art? So just want to talk a little bit more about what that feels like, both process and after completion, watching what is produced.
Hello. As a subject of the film, you're talking about the truth, and I, I had, I had a hard time to be in front of the camera and be truthful to the subject that both of them they were making. It took me sometimes to get used to the camera. I hated to, the camera always following and doing this thing, and it really prevented me, denied me from being truthful at the moment. But since I got used to it and I knew that this is about the reality of the situation, so I get used to it and become more truthful.
I want to, before I say anything, first of all, thank you, Anna, and the Vilcek Foundation, Rick and Liz for having us here. It's really a wonderful experience meeting these incredible people and these incredible waves. So my experience with documentary is that most people want to be in films. I've very rarely met people that didn't want to be a subject of a documentary. They always say they don't, but they do. This guy is an exception. He really does not want to be put himself out there, and that's, if anybody here is interested in making documentaries, that's exactly the character you want, because you have a better chance of getting something truthful. And Nicky was very uncomfortable in the beginning, but because we are his family, he really didn't have a choice but to get used to it. And so we did it for 3-4 years, and after the first, I'd say, 2 years, he got the hang of it, and it got a lot easier. And with respect to the question about truth, I find it interesting that in fiction film, people love saying this is based on a true story. And there's a reason for that, because true stories have currency. They have authority. And but to me, the way that I approach documentaries and narrative films is actually similar to Werner Herzog once said, that it doesn't matter if it's a narrative film or a fiction film or a documentary film, or at the end of the day, they're all films. So they have to tell a story and find some sort of essence of a truth. And that's kind of my approach.
And I think, you're speaking a little bit about, how do you capture the essence of the truth even in something that is a fiction film based on a true story? And that kind of leads me a little bit to Singh over here, because his film is fiction, but it's based on a true story. So I wonder how you feel about capturing what is an authentic pieces of that story while crafting it into a fictional narrative.
No, it's a really good question, and I think, as you were saying, I think inherently any form of filmmaking is contrived in some form or other, because you have to make a decision, or decisions, and every decision is conscious, and that reshapes where the narrative might go. For The Accidental Getaway Driver, yes, it's inspired by true events based on a true story, something that happened in 2016 in Santa Ana, Orange County. It was interesting because the subjects, notoriously in cinema, aren't always portrayed in the way that I really wanted to observe them in the film. You have 3 fugitives, 4 of them, all of them are what you would call an ethnic minority. They're a person of color, and these are Westernisms. However, we are in the West, and they're not afforded a depth within character studies and within cinema that you would expect or you would hope to see, especially with a story that Getaway is encircled around, which maybe you could imagine immediately a certain kind of thriller. So the decision was to humanize all the 4 characters and to be able to explore, to not answer, but to open the questions of how people are shaped, and it's oftentimes not in a vacuum as it's portrayed in filmmaking or in stories or in the media, but it's circumstance and it's environmental, and that in itself, I think the exploration of the human spirit in whatever form it takes, whether it's fiction or in documentary, is the search, I think, for what we look for, and that was the intention with Getaway.
And I think if we're, you know, that search for the authentic, something authentic human experience, it resonates not just in documentary or fiction form, but also in art as storytelling. And I think that's something that both Nicky and Geoff strive for in their artwork, is to, you know, capture something authentic about the human spirit. I was wondering if Geoff or Nicky, you could talk a little bit more about the stories that you are trying to tell with your artwork.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like a starting point to be like, I mean, it's again like discomfort, like to be unafraid of being overly sincere. You know, I think it's easy. The tricky thing about being an artist is like it's very easy, like if we're talking about truth, you can also like hide, and you can bury things, and you can be absolutely abstract. And that has a real appeal. And what I found was that if I set myself on a sort of a mission, right? Let's not say like I'm arriving there, but to be like clear, that it gave me a way to edit. It gave me this structure to build art around, about like clarity. And it's still like, I know like, I'm still not clear. Like when I talk to people, it's like, they don't know what I'm talking about. But along the way, as I'm traveling, they're somewhere, you know, at least we're striving for something that's like a clarity. And I think that, yeah, I don't pretend that it's arrived. You know?
So, my paintings, the subject of my painting is about society. It's about where I was born, where I was grow up, and that was Iran. And we had, from the beginning, I noticed a lot of injustices happening in our society, and I become interested in that. But I wasn't writer, I wasn't poet, I wasn't any of those things. So I only could paint. Painting by itself has its own language. It's not really something that you can tell story clearly, as you were saying. So I had to find a way to find a way to say the story in a clear way that I could. Also, I am kind of painter that loves painting, any kind of painting, abstract, graphics, whatnot. So I've been, for many years that I familiarized myself with how to construct a painting that at the same time to be an artwork and to be able to tell a story. And that story may not be, again, as you said, is clear. It's not clear. You can read it like this is chair, this is the guy sitting on the chair, and there's a discussion going on. But in an ambiguous way, you can sense there is something horrendous happening, either in the story or behind the story.
In the storytelling, you know, what you are putting forth a vision, but it really is up to the viewer of the artwork or the film to make their own conclusions and interpretations of what that is. And like you mentioned, people will see different things when they look at your artwork. Or when they watch these films, people are going to pick out different perspectives and things that they see. Obviously, we're talking about a little bit about like trying to find authenticity or truth, but it always is from, you know, a unique perspective. But the receiver might have, the viewer, the audience might have a different, completely different conclusion than you intended in the first place. So I was wondering a little bit, if you could talk a little bit about what your hopes are when you present art or film into the world. What is your hope that an audience will, you know, receive, what they'll get out of that piece? You know, obviously it's up to their own interpretation, but is there a specific vision that you hope to present with your work?
You expect me to see what the audience react to the painting? That's what you ask.
Sort of, what is the vision that you want to present? I mean, they may interpret the way they want to interpret, but
The vision is, as I said, to have a painting that tells a drama, a story, but it's not only that. That's the second part. The first part is the painting, how you work with the language of the painting, the language of the art. The combination of these two makes what I do. But what do I expect from the audience is, I don't know, they have to look at it, they find out whether they like it, they don't like it. That's not my problem.
yeah. Stirring emotion either way. Yeah. Does any other filmmakers have any sort of response into what your hopes are for the vision of your work as it goes into the world?
I'd like to. You have to talk? I think what I would like the audience to get, or maybe how I'd like to reach a wider audience than just, you know, whoever agrees with my politics or the way I think. So what I tried with this film, Skin of Glass, was to communicate in a personal way, you know, so you kind of open your heart to the personal story, and by the time you get to the social, political, and, you know, we're talking about homelessness, displacement, loss, in the end of the film or during the film, you're already seeing everyone and everything with an open heart and with more humanity towards, you know, the people, the stories I'm telling from the homeless people in the film. So I thought that, you know, if I make a film that's kind of an activism, you know, work that people agree with the way I think, would be easy and would be, you know, talking to, you know, the choir, you know, it's like you just not open other people's heart to and change their minds about very important subject matter. So that was my approach, to be very personal. I mean, because also the story demanded that from me, and I was feeling like that was the right way to tell that story, from the personal to the social and political. But I thought it was nicer, even nicer, if I could touch other people's heart, people that wouldn't be caring about that subject matter of the film.
I was gonna say, so the film that I'm at here for is a story about an incident in the Japanese cult that existed, and you know, of course, you don't immediately draw a simple line from there to here, and you know, living in the Western world in 2023. But for our case, my co-director and I, you know, as we worked on the story or the film, we kind of found it was a revelation that, you know, there's so much that we can that we see as a parallel line to modern world living in the West. And I guess the goal for any kind of film, whether it's documentary or narrative, is for an audience to feel something that is true to your own life. Random, foreign films like American films, Italian films, French films, it had nothing to do with my own life as a child growing up in the countryside in Japan, but I still got something. I still felt something really deep in my heart that speaks to my heart, and that's why we're all here, I think. So I think the bigger goal is for the audience, whoever is watching, whatever life they have at that moment, to feel something and maybe, learn a lesson or two that they can sort of reflect in their own lives.
So I think when you come from a place like Iran, it's really important for people outside of Iran to have an understanding of what the common people of Iran are like. Because it's so easy to lump everybody from the Middle East into one bad group. And the stories that we tell are different from the stories that a Lebanese person tells, and to make the distinction between different people, I think is really important. And when you learn about his story, you learn about a country's story, right? And so that creates empathy when you understand what somebody went through, what millions of people like him, like us, went through, how our families were affected by horrible politics, by, hijacking of religion. This creates empathy, and I think that's the most important for us, for me at least. That's what I want to get through.
I completely agree with all that. I think it's so important, especially today in 2023 in the United States. The United States is a country built on immigrants, and it's a multicultural place. But somehow we need to still hear these stories so that we can connect with these different communities within our community, because we're all part of the same community. So I wanted to, sort of moving in that direction, talk a little bit about why, what you just did, why is it important that we showcase stories from immigrant filmmakers, both behind and in front of the camera, from first generation and foreign-born filmmakers, and yes, creating, empathy and connection to other cultures is, I think, really, really crucial. But I don't know if anybody else has any specific thoughts on that as well.
I thought that was a beautiful answer and frames a really important question. If we're talking about the communities here, we're also talking about the homogenization of all the immigrants and refugees that come here. I know that's not what you're inferring, but it's an interesting point to expand on, because it's fragmented, as are all the communities, as are each generation, and we also have to account for the pursuit of assimilation into another culture as well, and what sacrifices are needed or chosen in order to fit in or to acclimate yourself to survive. And in doing so, intergenerationally, you lose parts of yourself. In different enclaves too, I'm referring in specifically to Getaway, which is centered around Vietnamese American diaspora. Every enclave across the United States has a different heartbeat, has a different, it's a different climate, it's a different influence from whatever the community is around them. So these are also fragmented, and I think when you grow up, as many of us, I'm sure, and many in the audience do, maybe some aren't from here, maybe some are from different regions or pockets. You form not just a part of yourself from where your parents came from or where you came from, but also the environment, and that creates another unique interpretation of your background and of your ethnicity and your culture. And that's displayed in different ways, and I think when you grow up, you're kind of questioned and challenged about what that is that makes you stand out, and you may feel shame, you may diminish that, you may hide parts of yourself. But I think it's important to highlight within a work or our voices, or just even in life experience, that the other version of the narrative that we're told in the West is that it's a beautiful intersection of the lives that, the multiple lives that you carry. And I think that's interesting as well, because I don't know if you feel or other people feel, there's an otherness that you can feel here, but there's an otherness that you can feel back in your native culture and country as well, where you're now interstitial in both. And I think that's an interesting and challenging place to navigate, existentially and practically.
I will just say this, I said this the other day in the class. When we showed our film, The Iran Job, in the South, in America, someone came up to us and actually said, well, I didn't think Iranians laughed. And it was like, it was such a dumb statement, and shocking to hear, but real. It was a real sentiment. And he walked away saying like, oh, you guys seem like really nice people. Well, thanks.
Oh, but that's a really good point, because the other thing as well is the challenge for not just for the audience to empathize with subjects that they're not familiar with, but for us to empathize with them, that they're allowed to discover something, you know? That's important too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. I think it's like we were talking before the panel. It's like bringing new perspectives. You know, it's so aligned with the panel, right? Who we are here, because coming from a different culture, you bring you bring a world with you, and you just create a new universe with this communication with the audience, right? I mean, you're bringing something different to make them think and feel different, and it's super important because we live in a global village today. It's like we have to understand and know more about each other's culture, because it is a shame, I would hear like, I'm from Brazil, and people would say, oh, so there's still snake, you see snakes in the streets, like, well, not in the cities, maybe in the Amazon, right? So, it's just this lack of, so it's even worse when it's about politics, right? Because it creates fear, and fear is about the different, what is different. So if we bring our perspective and a little bit of our stories, it creates more empathy and understanding. Yeah, it's super important.
Just a quick thing to add. I think nowadays it's very important. It's easy to kind of fall into one specific group of films or series or whatever visual content that's available on Netflix or whatever, because they kind of choose films for you, right? Based on what you saw previously, they kind of guide you to the films that you might like. But I think it's really important to kind of open your eyes and try something new, because I think not watching just one specific group of films or series is like growing up in a house and without like stepping outside, just believing what you're told by your parents. And I think that's just, it's kind of obvious why you have to go out and interact with other people, other lives, so that you can, for your own sake. It's not just about like make the world a better place. You have to kind of think about your own life being better and better by interacting with others and finding other cultures and other voices. And I think that's especially nowadays when you're kind of programmed to lean towards one spectrum of everything. I think it's important to kind of open up your mind and say, all right, I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna step outside and watch or encounter some new perspectives.
Definitely. I want an opportunity for the audience to ask any questions. If you have any question, just raise your hand and we will call on you. It can be a general question, or it can be for any one of our specific panelists. Yes, right here.
Hi, aloha. Thank you for this panel. It's extremely fascinating, and it's exceeded my expectations, what I came here to hear. and I've learned so much more. Yes, I grew up here in a grass shack eating coconuts on the beach. Born and raised in Hawaii, proud fourth generation Japanese American, filmmaker and documentarian. Here, prior to digital cameras and iPhones, we can make movies, but growing up, it took a lot of money to buy film, and you know, there's a lot of stories here with our elders, so a lot of us grew up making documentary films. But for, like Yanagimoto-san said, it's because we're fed to be in our, we're curated to be in our own silos in this day and age with technology and streamers. I find it almost daunting now to make films about my perspective growing up here and my perspective living in Japan, because it's a very unique view of stories I want to tell the world. So art costs money still to distribute. So any of you have advice on as to like how can any of us with a unique sense of voice or cultural background that we would love, my dream is to build bridges of empathy. Like you mentioned, it's very important. How do you balance that art or that need with the finances of, you know, seeking buyers or investors or distribution? I mean, it's harder, correct? Or is it easier these days?
You know, in our case, started out really with grants. You know, first of all, there's a certain amount of work that you just have to do without getting paid. You know, you just have to kind of accept that that's what's going to happen, and then depending on what your film is about, there's probably a grant out there, and it's up to you to kind of look for it and approach them and have your materials ready. Some written materials. There's something called the Documentary Core application that has some fantastic guiding questions. So even if it's not part of your application, those are great questions for you to start thinking about. And those applications actually push your project forward. They really help you put your vision down on paper, because you might have ideas and things are swirling in your head, but until you write it down, it doesn't really stick. And then pitch forums. I mean, the whole documentary landscape has changed, but you know, going to festivals, talking to people, telling people about your film, and just kind of putting yourself out there a little bit. Hopefully, slowly, you get the first grant, and that money begets money, and you get the second grant, and at least you can make your film, right? Like little by little. You can do something on the side, like dog walking or other things. But it is a challenge, I think, for everybody here. That is the biggest challenge. I have something to say about that.
Yeah, it's a, you know, and especially, you know, it's a challenge to even create artwork, to create films, but then also getting them seen, getting them out in the world. That is like in this day and age, there are more avenues than ever, but it also is simultaneously more difficult than ever. And I know there's a lot happening in the industry right now, which is sort of, you know, compiling all of this on top of each other. But I really, you know, wanted to talk a little bit about like, how do you get, you know, I think it's my mic. How do you get your work seen? How do you get your work seen in the world? What is, you know?
Well, I mean, also just a little bit back to this question, I think it is really crucial to not lose hope, just, you know, because as somebody like you has a very specific idea of your perspective and what you want to tell, you're in a good spot. I bet you if you spend, you know, a couple of days researching, you'll find not just one, but, you know, probably 5 or 6 grants that in some way or another touch on whatever it is you're trying to communicate. And the reason these grants are good, even though they can really be annoying, the work you have to put in, but it's good because it forces you to also identify who's your audience and how am I going to get the film out. Because not only is it a bitch to make a film, it's equally hard to find that platform. And without the platform, there's almost, I mean, I'm not in the business of making films to show to my grandparents. I want people to see it, right? And that's it's interesting. We were having a bunch of conversations here yesterday about various people's films, and even though some of them are very, very accomplished, it's still hard to find that audience, right? Or you have, models like Geoff's film where it's self-financed. That makes the filmmaking process easier if somebody can afford to do that, but it still doesn't give you that audience, right? So, or that platform right away. So that's something that I would encourage everybody to kind of keep in mind, is to understand the work is not finished when your film is finished. It's almost like that's where it begins. So it's a bit of a marathon, and just being aware of that is helpful.
I could add an additional take to this. I don't know if your work is going to primarily be as a documentarian or in fiction, but I can offer another take within fiction, which is, and I'm sure many of us think about, that within specificity, within your story, within our stories, that the universal appeal isn't the commercial universal appeal, but it's we keep talking about the empathy, the humanity within these subjects. And when you pitch a fiction film, now no matter how specific it should, as someone's reading it, even from the furthest place from where you might be, start to think about their own lives or their own interactions, and this reminds me of this, and it's that connection. That's what makes people really interested. So I think that's also important. And as they were saying, there are a lot of grants out there, and there are a lot of labs that offer that support in this paradox of virtual connectivity, but really we're, I think, even more isolated than ever. So it's important to find those communities and hopefully, begin the process. It is a marathon, like you said, and the other side of it is we're in a tough time where the market is still coming out of what happened in 2020. People are still trying to get to the theaters. Streamers have their mandates. We're losing the craft of the art. But as we were talking in the back, it's in these times, in times of friction, that the best kind of voices of expression do form. And I think that, that strength of character is also equally important in this time.
I just want to mention PEAC, the Pacific, that stands for?
Islanders and Communications.
Do you know them?
Yeah,
okay.
Pacific Islanders and Communications. Do we have any other questions? Just raise your, yep, right here in the middle.
Yeah, this question is for Geoff, and I think everybody, because I think everyone's kind of contributing to the same idea, but you talk about enjoying feeling uncomfortable, and I like that. I think that's very cool. How is that just in your life, or do you feel like that's for you as an artist? Like, is it critical to being an artist? And like, how far do you push it? Do you seek these things out, and like, how does your world around you like deal with that or react to that? Or yeah, so it's for everybody. It's for Geoff and for everybody.
Like for me, uncomfortable. It's a little bit like endurance, and so there's those moments like you're not sure. Like in endurance sports, you don't know. The whole idea is like no one knows their limit, but you want to go right to it. Like if you're like, oh, I finished that race or something, and you're not destroyed, you're sort of like, oh, that's a disappointment because I didn't find my limit. Like maybe, and I think like art making is like that. Like there's all these moments of discomfort. Like for me, like, I mean, when I started painting, it's like, oh, this is terrible. But you keep going. But most art is really bad at some point, or a poem, like writing, editing. It's like, there's these moments. So like, I think artists, like you get comfortable with like, oh, I know this is bad, but I'm not gonna stop, But I mean, like 3 days ago, I put down my brush and I was like, I'm stopping. And like usually you have the moment you don't actually put it down, and I'm like, that's crazy. Like I've been at this so long, and I put it down and I picked it up and kept going, and eventually after multiple days I figured out the problem or whatever. So that's what I sort of talk about discomfort, but it is the same as like when you finish the film, and you don't have distribution and nothing's happening. And you know, it's a similar thing, like, oh, I guess this is, you know, that's a different type of discomfort. It has to do with the outside world. So then you're like, oh, I have to go forward and push, like, reach out and come up with like a solution that is not obvious. And I think that's like the reality of art making. It's like, for me, like, art making is like, you want your whole brain to be lit up. Like, there's like, yes, there's the creative part, and that's kind of simple, but then there's also the part that's like more like mechanical or business oriented, and you want to light it all up, and there's some discomfort to that. But that's where, you know, pushing yourself and finding new territory sometimes, not just following a sort of zen, peaceful art making path.
I think creating art is solving problems. You're solving problems all the time, and that creates a lot of discomfort, and it's uncomfortable too, right? You have everything's becomes a little bit like, how do I solve this problem with the editing, or this problem with the middle of the production? Things that go in different directions, and you have to be spontaneous and be fast, but it's a lot of solving problems. That's how I feel sometimes.
I think it's creating a lot of problems.
That's true.
But I don't know. I find it interesting when I do think there's a difference between filmmaking and fine art, or various different disciplines. And I was struck by Nicky when, you know, part of our film we had to ask him a lot about his original inspiration, how he became an artist, and almost was like he didn't have a choice. There's no choosing for somebody like this. I remember clearly once you said, I never even, I think you saw a couple of films about artists that influenced you, and you said, I want to be that, but there was never a concern about finances or surviving or anything like that. It's for somebody like that, it's more like a need to breathe. So there is no choice. And I think we were talking about the difficult times that our industry is in right now. Sometimes that's not a bad thing, because it sort of sounds maybe a little harsh, but it weeds out the people that don't really have that need. And that's sometimes not so bad, because then it opens up opportunities for the people that are crazy enough or needy enough to still have to do it, you know. And I always find hope in, you know, last year we had this incredible film, All That Breathes. I don't know if any of you have seen it, about a bunch of birds, and you're like, wow, how did this get made and find a platform? And it's so inspiring to me that it happens, you know. And so it's just a sign that if you have to tell a certain story, whatever that story is, if it's about a bunch of birds and no dialogue, and you find a way to tell it in an interesting way, there's going to be an audience. So just as a sign of encouragement there, because our industry has always been hard. It's not like, you know, there's once in a while you have these peaks where people are somehow crazy, and it's like the gold rush, and they buy a bunch of stuff and never lasts for longer than 2-3 years, and then we're going back down, you know. And you just have to kind of, it's like, I think it's a little bit like surfing, which I tried this morning. It wasn't very successful.
Long lull, we're in a bit of a lull. Set's coming. Maybe.
I love that. I love that. We have one question right here.
Kind of brought up an interesting point. Maybe, Nicky, you could tell us some of the artists that helped to inspire you in your work. Was it like Salvador Dali, or were the artists from Iran?
There's so many of them. The whole history of art inspired me, and from Michelangelo, Raphael, up to Rembrandt, and just come down to these days, a lot of contemporary art.
Let's say you had to pick three.
Three. That's very difficult. I think Picasso would be one of them. That's for sure. But about the other two, so many of them. I've been inspired even by bad painting. It really gives me. But looking at the painting, any painting, I look for the mistake, where they made a mistake, and if that mistake, if I find it, it gives me a lesson how to not repeat it. That's what. That's the basic inspiration I get.
I wanted to know, what do you guys think when you're telling someone else's perspective or you're telling a story? How do you capture that story without feeling like you're almost like selling their story or putting their story on like blast? How do you do that?
I mean, I can add to the subject. I was like the first version of the film that Dan made on me, it was like really atmospheric and like sort of non-linear. And I really liked it. It was more like, oh, if I made a movie on myself, it'd be like this. And it was sort of like, more like a piece of art that was like, it was vague. And then Spike Jonze got involved. And he was like, and we've been friends a long time, he's like, Geoff's not like that. Geoff like has friends. Geoff has like a story. Geoff has like, there's like gotta be some more to it. And he had them talk to my parents and talk to my wife and talk to other people. But I also see how he like, I'll be like, I didn't really say that. Like, he'll like, there's like dialogue and he uses dialogue from different places. It's like filmmaking. Like he did some filmmaking. And as a subject, I'm like, it's totally true. Like I know he's getting across like, because I wasn't willing to share things in the room. And so I think that's I'm sure filmmakers come across this all the time where you're like, I'm not like making this up. It's just he wouldn't say it. Or I can put this image with, your filmmaking stuff. And I think I don't know what that is, but maybe they can answer as a subject, I was fine with it because I understood the intention, but it's odd,
Yeah, I guess for my film here, it wasn't about one person or a group of people. It was about an incident and people who were involved in the incident or the phenomena from many perspectives. And I think as long as we're staying true to their core belief or like the core of what they're saying, we're as filmmakers, I think we have liberty of using, different pieces, because they're not professional actors. They don't, if they act like they're professional actors, that's not the story that they're telling. So I think it's our job to sort of put together in the edit, for my case at least, in the editing room, we piece together what they're saying so that their message becomes clearer once the audience who doesn't know anything about this subject hears it, because it takes time for us to really understand what their message is. We do interviews for hours, and sometimes they're used for 10 minutes. And it's our job to really carry their true message that might not come to surface if you hear just one quick sentence, but I think it is important to tell the truth of their story in the manner that makes sense in the film that might not necessarily be just a raw material from their interview, if that answers the questions.
Well, we are coming to the close. We're about out of time today for today's panel, but I think I wanted to sort of close with a little bit of a what's next question. This can be to anybody. Is there a story or a project that you are just really dying to work on or create next? Like what is next for our filmmaking team here?
My first project is a vacation. Haven't had one in 6 years. But I'm also I'm thinking of creating a book about my father's work, because I found so much stuff, when I was doing research, and it's amazing. There are like 280 projects, and I had no idea. So it's an old project that I want to bring back maybe and change the media a little bit, give me a break from film. So, and also, can I invite people to see the film at 3:30? Whoever is would like to go after the panel 3:30. We're showing Skin of Glass again. So, but thank you.
It will be another film, but I think what's interesting, or what I found during this time of reflection, because everybody had to go through a time of reflection with the strike, is with personal stories, it takes so much out of you as well, whether that's how vulnerable you are, how traumatic it is to relive certain things, or just the energy that it takes. And so for me, I want to make my next project maybe a romantic mystery, but I know it's almost like in some mind, it's a palate cleanser from my mind, but I know that at some point my curiosity and my fire will kick in again, and I'll want to know how I can subvert that. And so it's almost giving yourself a door to walk through, and that your character yourself will reignite at some point.
So Sara and I, we kind of got pulled into a project when we were still finishing the film about him at the beginning of the year. We're approached by a UK producer, and they had some development money, and so we kind of dove right into it. And but it's a story that is about an Iranian activist who inspired women 10 years ago to take off their hijabs, and is now on the hit list of the Iranian regime, and in 24-hour FBI protection. Also was awarded Time Woman of the Year this year. But her story is unfolding so quickly that we're not able to keep up with the fundraising. Right? So and that's often a challenge. She's going to a conference in a couple of weeks in Lithuania, where she's meeting with Garry Kasparov and other such activists, and we got to figure out a way to film it. And that's often the case with certain documentaries, not so much the story about him, where we had a little more time, but sometimes it's tough to kind of catch up with. It's such a fast-moving story, and I feel like we've had at least 2 or 3 like that, where we were constantly catching up and trying to make it work. And then we have another long-term project that we've been filming on for 5 years. But really, what we want to do is make a film about backgammon, because we're a little addicted. Every day we lose 2-3 hours a day playing backgammon.
That's not true.
Yeah. So it's maybe 2 hours, not 3 hours. And I would love to find somebody who says, you know what, that would make a great film in 90 minutes. I'm thinking all that breathes is really inspirational. There might not be any dialogue, just the sound of the dice. That would be my personal dream. Same.
No, I was gonna say what's next for me is I do a lot of things in the media industry. I direct, I usually produce, and I started distributing last year, and I distribute Osaka Japanese independent films that doesn't necessarily land on North American or worldwide distribution. And so I was very consumed with the directing job. I really respect directors now, because, I did before, but of course, but I have so much more respect to the directors, because it's so demanding and so time consuming, and it kind of takes life out of you. And So I was doing that all last year. I've been sort of focusing on distributing work effort, and I do have a couple of producing works that I kind of left in the back last year. So I'm started working on it, and also this process for me directing was so much joy, and it was I really enjoyed it. So my co-director and I are developing a few more ideas, and I'm actually going to Tokyo on Tuesday and do a little bit of research on those subjects.
That's wonderful. And yet, Chiaki is doing some amazing work with her company Saka, Sakka, if you want to check it out online, bringing a lot of, bringing independent Japanese films to the American audience. They really don't otherwise have an avenue, so it's wonderful. Any Geoff or Nicky, anything you're working on at the moment, or what's inspiring you right now?
Inspiring?
Yeah.
I've sort of been having like a one continuous painting show through the years. So my last show is going to be in Toronto at Cooper Cole, which opens in November, and it's called Nature Mart, which is named for the health food store that went out of business in my neighborhood. But it refers to like that the actual ongoing project is like to make it's images that deal with the idea of empathy, and to create like I've tried use it because it's like painting imagery exists outside of language. So I was like, oh, I could use this to like create all these new definitions of the word understanding, so different understandings. And last year it was just like human understanding, and this year it's like understanding between like sort of animals and humans and nature and humans, but it's still a type of understanding. So understanding being so like sort of binary, whereas like we need understandings where it's like, oh, I totally disagree with you, but I understand you. We need, it's the cliche of like Eskimos have 100 words for snow, which I don't even know if that's true. But like if we had 100 words for understanding, so I'm trying to create all this visual language for understanding.
I love that.
My project is constantly about freedom and justice. And a week ago, something happened in Iran which is really horrendous. A filmmaker with his wife, a prominent filmmaker by the name Dariush Mersoui, was slain with his wife in his home, allegedly by the government. So since last week, I'm thinking that become a project, and I'm thinking of the German painting by the name Gerhard Richter, when he made a bunch of painting about the band of Beider Meinhof, I guess. But that's a ongoing project, and I'm not going to do it in a realistic form, but I have to find a way to mix it with how I do it. But yesterday, or the day before, we went through a tour around the island, and there was a guide that was our guidance, and he was so fantastic, and the area was so beautiful that I told him, I guess my next project would be Hawaiian painting.
Wonderful. Well, we are out of time today, but I do want to remind everyone we have 3 screenings tonight with filmmakers in attendance. We'll have Skin of Glass at 3:30. And we have A Revolution on Canvas with Nicky, Sara, and Till at 5:45. And then at 8:30 tonight, we'll be showing The Accidental Getaway Driver with Sing. We do have encore screenings of these tomorrow, but our guests will be here at the screenings today. So please come check it out and stay with us and enjoy the rest of the program. And a huge mahalo to all of our artists and filmmakers today.